budget meeting, and welcome our JFS director and his staff. I was going to say eminent. Yeah. Welcome, though.
Thank you. Good afternoon. And I will introduce Jennifer Wanshade, who's our business administrator, and Stephen Sikora, our fiscal officer, fiscal supervisor. And we did have a presentation. This is going to kind of focus on some of our accomplishments over the year, kind of show you the numbers and the work that we've been doing. And then we were going to touch on some of the org keys in the budget that may, raise question because of the percentage changes and things like that.
Okay.
Of course, at any time throughout, any questions or at the end, if there's some specific org keys we did not touch on, we'd be happy to address those as well.
Okay, thank you.
The first one's just showing our table of organization. Last year, we had reduced our FTEs from about 77 or 78 FTEs down to 70. We're looking at holding the FTEs again at 70 employees. You will see that there are quite a few vacant positions, which are colored a little darker than the others. The biggest change in the org key this year, or table of org, is looking at bringing in 2 new employees for our CCMEP program. Currently, that program is contracted with Marion Technical College, and we're about 18 months into the contract. Recently, their employee that was contracted resigned and went back to a teaching position in Mansfield City Schools, so the position's vacant. We feel that we can better manage the position if they're internal employees as opposed to a contracted employee. We can actually assign 2 people to administer the program as opposed to contracting and paying the administrative fees plus 1 employee for pretty much the same amount. The contract amount's $140,000. If we look at full benefits, meaning full family insurance and salary, it's $144,000. So about a $4,000 increase, but we do think we can grow the program by having internal employees.
And that program specifically does?
It's comprehensive case management, working for 14 to 24-year-olds for job readiness, so training and other job readiness programs.
Okay, thank you.
This is just kind of a snapshot of our 19 budget and projected expenses for our salaries and benefits, and then what we're looking at in 2020. So we were approved just over $3 million for the budget, looking at expending $2.778 million. The reason that is not as high as we had budgeted is we did not fill some of the vacancies that we had asked for last year. We did not see the need to fill those at the time. We did leave them in the budget, so we're back up to the $3.2 million just in case we see a need to fill the vacancies. We wanted to have the budget there. And a lot of the increase from 2019 to 2020 will be the addition of the 2 CCMEP employees, and then an increase for employees as well. I just found this interesting, so I wanted to put this in. I think this is just something that we've done well in Job and Family Services. The slide on the left is showing overtime compensation and its hours worked for years 2018 and 2019. In 2018, there were 6,371 hours of overtime paid out at time and a half for an amount of $152,000. This year, we have reduced overtime down to 1,563. And we've only paid out $40,386, so we saw a savings. Now, some of that, or the most of that, is due to actually hiring 3 new employees that we've been able to retain, and they're trained now, and they're doing good work, so the overtime's not needed. The slide then on the right is just kind of comparing the last 2 years of number of hours worked and what was paid out. So we paid out almost 8,000 hours of overtime of 192,000, and that kind of equates, I could hire 4 employees, the 3 we have and 1 additional, and actually have more man hours worked for less dollars because of the time and a half requirement of overtime. I will say that the staff, now that we've been able to retain staff, our overdue docs, I'm sure you've heard that we had overdue applications and renewals. We are pretty much caught up on those. Now, any given day when you look at a report, it could show some, but they have been doing a great job, and we're getting the work done, and some of the numbers later will show that. Next year, we will, in the public assistance side, we will not be offering overtime because we believe we can get the job done, get it done well and on time without offering the overtime now that we're staffed.
We had a big backlog, I think it was in 2018, as I recall, of income maintenance files.
Yes.
Would that have accounted for a big chunk of the overtime in 2018?
Yes, prior to my arrival, they were working mandatory overtime, and I believe that was towards the last quarter or so of 17 and probably most of the first half of 18.
Yeah, that's the
And that's
time.
where those hours were coming from. My understanding is they had thousands of documents that were past due. I know Knox County came in. And
Yeah, we had
assisted us
several
to catch
counties,
those
yeah.
up. But we've kind of changed some of our business practices, and we are staying caught up. We're caught up now, and
Oh, great.
because of our processing days and the way that our business practices are, I do not anticipate the need for that any longer.
Okay, good.
A question. In 2019, you're down 8 positions that were unfilled. In 2019, eight. Your overtime was also down in 2019, 75% roughly. So do those positions need to be filled?
The positions that are not filled right now, we do have a fiscal specialist, and we only have one fiscal specialist at this time, and she does all of our kind of county budget work, from purchase orders and encumbering, and there may be a need at some point to have a backup for her, and then also there's some other things we'd like to explore. As far as the income maintenance side, we have a posting that we assume will be filled internally, and we would replace that, but with this vacancy here, we would not, that's showing on, that was previously on there. Let's see if I can, that would not, the ones under the workforce development side, we have I'm sorry, that's hard to see. The employer rep, that was a vacancy created because our employee went to the state of Ohio in workforce development, and the employer rep actually goes out and works with the area businesses as far as working with the services we can provide employers. And we do have that one posted currently. When Colt was here, he did a great job of getting into the business sector and providing services. The other employee counselor position will be kind of managing our PRC plan and working as far as some of the other TANF kind of eligibility. Right now, we have one employee that's trying to do that as well as some of the work activities, and it's really too much for that person. And then the 2 vacant CCMEPs is what I would propose to bring in-house, which would be new under the workforce. On the children's services side, then we have 2 vacancies. One of the employees just became our FCFC, or Family Children First Council Director.
Oh, yes.
So that position is now filled, and her position's posted, and then the other vacancy was created by resignation due to personal reasons, and at this time, I'm not planning on filling it. I have talked with Sandy, and she's asking if we can fill it later after the first of the year because she's seeing some of our case counts go up. So we're just going to keep an eye on that.
Do you think the employee service rep position is something that is going to be easy to recruit for? I know that was hard to find somebody, and I saw in the exit interview that, compensation was a big reason for the exit.
Yes, we did, we are looking at paying that a little bit more as opposed from the same rate as like an IM3 worker. It is difficult to find someone with the educational requirements that we want, and also someone that's going to go out and talk to CEOs and CFOs and those kind of positions. That we're paying $20 an hour. I know the
Yeah.
employee that left went to the state of Ohio, which pays quite a bit more than we do. I believe this kind of puts them, what we're proposing to pay them is kind of the same rate as an economic development, I think Zach's position in that, and I don't know the title. So I'm hoping we can recruit at that level. The next few slides are just more performance slides, and this is in the public assistance. And I just put this in just to show that we are improving. The line across the top there is the state goal, which is 95% performance, and we're staying the same in the application timeliness for OAF. Our application timeliness in SNAP, which is food stamps, went up by 2%, and our accuracy went up 1%. We're at 100% accuracy. So, you know, like I say, I think the retaining of employees, having people trained is helping our performance there. And this one here is just to show, we're a member of Collaborate, and this is just to show where we are compared to those counties. I did put Warren County in as well, because I know we do compare ourselves to Warren at different times. We are basically third out of the 9 counties in Collaborate as far as our timeliness and SNAP. Again, I think the business practices and things like that have helped us.
Where was Seneca County?
I don't know. I actually have a supervisor that comes to tell me when we're better than Seneca County, but I haven't heard from her in a few weeks.
And you're better.
So
Yeah,
they're probably right in there, but I don't know.
yeah.
And this is just, you know, just more information of the work we're doing. For 2019 through October, we have 5,262 households receiving SNAP food assistance with a monthly payout of $641,000. And you'll see the comparison there to past years. And then the next one is the same thing for Medicaid is
Why do you think SNAP went up from 18 to 19? I would have expected it to continue to trend down.
Yeah, right, and I do not have an explanation that, we had that conversation this morning of why that went up. Yeah, I do
And
not
then the
have a good
Medicaid is down.
And Medicaid came down a little bit.
So that's, you'd think,
Right, you'd think it would almost go the other direction, but.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And again, and I won't read all of these, because a lot of this is just kind of where we're at. Our ask for public assistance side, which is the workforce, and our income maintenance is the same as it was last year, the $466,000. And our lines are pretty much the same. We did put additional funding in for training and some things like that, but pretty close to the budget we had last year. This is just showing some of the accomplishments of our workforce division. We are seeing an increase in visits to the Ohio Means Job Center. Through October, we had 1,146 visitors, and they tell me they received multiple calls of people thanking with our assistance of finding employment. We are working with employers now that are coming in and using our facilities to conduct interviews and job interviews, and we post those. And we're doing 8 sessions a week, so we have 4 employers, 2 sessions each, and we're trying to build that as well. The OJTs, or on-the-job training, that is a program that we work with employers to find them the proper prospective employee. If they hire that person, we will reimburse of wages as they get trained. We have completed 1 of those, and that's my understanding, the first one we've done in quite a few years. We have 2 more that are getting ready to start, and we have 2 that we're working through the process now. I actually received a call from another employer a week ago, and right now the big push in the state are apprenticeships, and they're looking at doing some apprenticeships and combining that with the OJTs. So we're going to reach out to them as well.
And the follow-up on this, I mean, are they followed to just see how long they retain employment, or any way of keeping track?
They do follow-up with them. I honestly don't know what the outcomes are.
Okay.
Offhand, but they do follow up to see if people are retaining those.
Yeah, yeah.
So we'll work with the employer as much as we can, and we'll try to incentivize people as well.
Okay.
To stay in the jobs, thinking that if they stay for a period of time, then they're going to be there for long term.
Sure, yeah.
Our CCMEP that I mentioned earlier, we have 51 youth enrolled currently. Again, if we can add the 2 positions, I do think we'll see that grow. I know Delaware City Schools, Buckeye Valley are interested in us getting more involved with their population and getting people into programs. And then we have the adult dislocated, which is job training and things. We have 88 active cases there. These are primarily funded, all federal funding.
By,
Federal funding.
Federal funding, okay.
WIOA dollars and TANF dollars.
okay, thank you.
PRC plan, recently, beginning of October, the board passed our new PRC plan, which assists with retaining placement in homes, so children are not being replaced, so family preservation strengthening, and also employment readiness and supportive services. And that's all funded with TANF dollars as well. One of the changes that was in our budget, we did add $11,000, and I'm rounding numbers, but $11,000 to a line for purchase of equipment for our Ohio Means Jobs Center. Those are incentive dollars that were earned. We had 7 people in our program that gained employment, and if we fill out the paperwork, there's incentives that go with that. So last year we had 7 people, we earned $11,000. We would like to use that funding to replace our computers. My understanding is we have some computers that we cannot upgrade any longer. They're that old. And we're also looking at some of the furnishings. The chairs that are in there now have fabric seats. And with the volume of people that are coming in, we'd like to replace those with something that can be clean. So we're kind of looking at all the needs and the requests. So we can use that 11,000, and we also have 7 people this year already that have gained, so we're looking to get that incentive again the following year so we can continue to update this OJ Center. So now we're into Children's Services, and that's usually where the big ask is, general fund dollars. Again, in Children's Services, we are staffed. We have the 2 vacancies, so over the past year, we were fully staffed. We had smaller caseloads, and like I say, 1 person had to leave for personal reasons. The other one got promoted into a FCFC directorship, so we have those vacancies. I think with some of the numbers we're seeing as far as lower cost and placement, better case management, is because, again, we have seasoned staff that's staying. And that benefits not only the families, but it also assists with our budget as well. This is just a graph I like to put up that shows how much the local funding is used to fund the Children's Services Division and placement costs. As you can see, last year it was 46% of local dollars. This year, 51%. The commissioners were generous last year and awarded or approved $2 million to be placed into our Children's Services Fund. And there's a graph later that I'll show, but our cash reserves were getting quite low in that, so we asked for $2 million just to build that up in case we receive sibling groups or high dollar needs. And that worked, and our ask is going to be much lower. Governor DeWine's, one of his priorities was funding Children's Services and youth, and we'll see that as we go through, that they've more than doubled what we will get from the state, which will reduce what we'll need from the
Boy, that's great.
and this is the graph, and it's hard to see, but if you look along the bottom, in 2018, we had $1 million, but our cash balance was, or our fund balance was down to $491,000. And we had $2.5 million in expenditures. This year, with the $2 million coming in, we will see a fund balance projection of about $1.9 million as a reserve, and our expenditures are projected in the 2.5 range. And the next slide will show how much of that is for children foster placement, and that is coming down. A projection moving into December is lower than we've seen in the past. But of course, some of the expenses are going up as we add staff as well in order to kind of manage those caseloads.
So you are seeing a decrease in the foster care?
Yes, we're seeing a decrease in our caseload size and children placed in care. I think a year or so ago, anywhere from probably 30 to 36, and we've been as low as 25 in care this year.
Okay.
And our days in placement is greatly reducing. And types of placement, you'll see there's probably more days going towards local foster homes and less in residential. And I think that having the staff on hand, they can work more directly with the parents and the families and reunify the children quicker, so we're not paying for as many days.
So big picture, why do you think the need is going down? I mean, it's certainly a good sign, but a year ago, you were very concerned that it was going up, and it's turned out that it's gone down, so I think that's great.
Yeah, and I guess I would have to give, and I don't have a great answer for that, other than I think our staff and having the time to work with the families. I just think, we're more hands-on. If you have 6 or 7 cases compared to 12 to 15, you're in the homes more, you're working with the families more, you're getting the services they need, and moving forward.
As far as the money that our general fund received, in 18, you mentioned the million, and then the 2 million in 19, is that whole 2 million from the governor's initiative through the legislature? or-
Actually, that is funding that was requested and approved. County general fund dollars being transferred to our fund.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Okay.
And I think, well, I'm coming up, but yeah, in a couple slides, I'll explain how
okay.
the new state budget worked and
Oh,
how
okay.
that's reducing what we're.
Okay, thank you.
And these are just some kind of numbers you'll see. The 19 is only through October, and we have about 1,900 referrals, 353 that were accepted cases. We have the foster placements, I think it says 49, but that's total that were placed throughout the year. We have kinship placements, they're pretty close to the same. There's 3 adoptions that happened early in the year, and we have 3 more adoptions scheduled
Oh, okay.
before the end of this year.
Oh, okay.
So we are finding adoption placements also for children in care.
Oh, great.
And this one, Commissioner, this kind of shows where the days are, which will kind of decrease our costs. You'll see that kind of the light orange bar that's way up in 18 is down, and those were our network foster homes, so those are a little more expensive, probably I'd guess 75 to high hundreds, $100 to $200 a day, and we're reducing the number of days that we're contracting for that. Our local foster homes are about the same, and that's the same number of days from October compared to all of last year. So I think we'll see that increase, and our residential. And those residentials can be $250 to $400 a day, and we have fewer of those as well. So those are where we're seeing cost savings as far as our foster care placements.
Bob, can I make a note? So one of the big things that we see is that the foster homes that we have here in Delaware, one, keeps the kids in our community, where they grew up, where their friends are,
Oh, okay.
where their family members are, it's closer. And 2, they cost $22 a day versus some of these other placements cost hundreds of dollars a day. So we're seeing, 1, it's a better placement, and 2, it's better for our budget to have
Okay.
those kids there.
Oh, great.
Now, someone told me this the other day, I honestly don't recall who, but some of our foster kids go outside the county for foster homes because we don't have enough foster
Correct.
parents in county?
Yes, some based on need. You'll see some of the higher needs. They could end up in a network facility that has foster homes trained to meet their needs, and some go to residential because of severe needs, behavior needs, mental health needs, and things like that.
So those going outside the county are not because the kids without the serious needs, it's mainly the serious needs that are going outside the county. It's not, I don't know how, I'm trying to find the politically correct way to say it, but do we have kids who are considered relatively normal that are going outside the county, or is it mainly the ones bigger needs?
And I don't have an exact answer on that. We look locally first. Our local foster homes do have an option to accept or not. So we kind of go through the progression. And if we cannot find a local foster home that we'll accept. It could be because of behaviors or needs, it could be because it's a larger sibling group, different things like that, that our local foster homes just are not equipped to handle, then they would have to be placed outside. Normally, when they're placed outside, I would assume those are more of the network homes, so the needs are a little bit higher. So we have to find a special home that's going to accept them and be able to meet their needs. But we do everything within our power to keep them local. As Stephen was saying, you know, if we can keep children in their community, you know, in the same school system, it's better for them, it's easier to make the visits with parents and reunify then quickly. So that,
Commissioner, if you see the two middle bars, those are the placements that are most likely outside of our county. So we have really decreased this year so far. The two middle bars are out of county, and the dark red is our county. So we're one above right now, one day above right now in our county, and the other ones are coming down. So that's a good sign, that we're getting more kids in our placement, in our homes, and not outside of county.
so I get, and to explain, and I'll jump into the state budget. So I went past my note. We saw an increase of our state funding. It went up by $633,000. So we'll be receiving from the state of Ohio $1,032,000. So that increase of 633 plus the $2 million that we received in 19 from the county general fund, we will be requesting $750,000 to put in for covering our costs. Now, the state did develop a formula, and they call it an MOE, maintenance of effort. When the state stepped up and granted or awarded additional funding through their budget, they wanted to ensure that counties were going to continue to contribute to the fund. They worked with the County Commissioners Association and our associations to come up with this formula. Basically, what they did is they took 4 years, so it'd be calendar year 16, 17, 18, right?
15, 16.
15 through 18, I'll get that. And they averaged what was received by the county. And that's what they said.
Oh, okay.
So
That's-
let's put in 2 million last year worked against us?
It'll work against us next year. But I promise I was not aware they were doing this. So they're looking at, our actual MOE, it will be $675,000 from the estimates that we came up with. We put $750 just to kind of keep that cushion again. And then the commissioners, you know, that's, you know, where you're comfortable, if you want to do 650 or 675 or 750, you know, that we will work within either. Next year, though, we'll move it into 19, so the $2 million will be figured in as part of the average, and that will increase us to about $925,000, according to the formula developed by the state.
Boy. Glad to see, the governor really, that's one of the first things he did. I think the first thing he
I'm
did.
sure we weren't alone in increasing last year with the rising costs, you know, of placement. So I'm sure most counties are, the amount that they've contributed has risen over the last couple of years.
Correct. So, and we are fortunate. There's many counties out there, very small counties, that have 3 to 4 times the number of children in care. And that's, you know, when the governor did this and commissioners struggled with funding their placements, but they also did not want to supplant funds by counties by putting, you know, increasing to meet the need and counties backing out. So that's why the MOE was about.
Thank you. That's great.
And I don't know if I touched on any of the other org keys that showed a percentage increase or questions. You know, we kind of saw the request of revenue as being a factor, the addition of the 2 employees for CCMEP and canceling the contract. If that's approved, we'd do that through the end, cancel that as the end of December and bring our own staff in. We added a little extra money to training accounts so we can get, offer additional trainings to managers and employees and those kind of things, but really nothing that major.
I find funding for JFS the most confusing. And, you know, we always see it once a year. I heard a laugh, Dennis, so I think it's an agreement.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
find it, somehow we've made it complicated, and I think, and we're, not about you, I'm talking about the structure. I always sit here, feel like I'm stupid sometimes, because it seems so complicated and so difficult to follow.
Yeah, and we probably would all agree with that statement. It's very complicated. We find it complicated, and I feel kind of stupid myself sometimes trying to work through some of these programs and the funding requirements of them.
Yes, Brad.
I got a good story with that. So when we started doing these audits for the state auditor's office, me and my senior audit manager met with the fiscal person for Ross County area, Paul Logan. I don't know if she's still out there or not. But we sat down with her. So I'm with my senior audit manager. He's a CPA, really smart guy. We sat down with him and we're like, explain this to us, you know, how financing works. And she explained it to us, and we said, okay, can you pretend that we're like 10-year-olds? And then she explained to us, and we said, okay.
Let's try 5.
Yeah.
Seriously, anything that their finance people are doing is extremely complex, and your team deserves the highest regards for.
It's not a reflection on people sitting here in front of me. It's just the process, state and federal, that creates this
Yeah,
monster.
yeah.
It's so hard to follow and understand.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Well, fortunately, we have you guys too.
that's right.
Fortunately, I have them. That's,
Yeah, to interpret it. Is there anything else, Bob, you'd like to add, and then we'll open up for questions?
there's nothing I would add. I'm very proud of what the accomplishments over the last year or so that I've seen. I think of the staff over there, Jennifer's newer on board, and Stephen, but the rest of the staff, and with the performance and catching us up, being able to limit overtime, and then on the children's services side, just very proud and happy to be part of the agency.
Boy, thank you very much. Questions? Commissioner Benton?
Yeah, again, thank you for putting this together and bringing us up to date. It really does look like, particularly in the children's services area, we're making progress, real progress in taking care of the kids and getting them, better care, quicker care, more economical care for the county. I had talked to Brad a little bit ago before we got started, and kind of on to Commissioner Merrill's point, this is very confusing, and I'm a numbers guy, and I'm confused by it. So what I'd like to see is your grand total of all the organizations that are included in your numbers. And this is very common with a lot of the offices and departments that we oversee, is there's so many different subsets that and sometimes there's movement between them that cause things to be very confusing. So it looks like Brad's already done what I've asked, or at least maybe. So anyway, a couple comments. First of all, again, the total of all that you spend is one thing I'd like to see, regardless of source. What are you spending in total?
Can I add to that? And what part of that state, what part of that's federal, what part of that's?
Well, no,
Or you added that?
I'm talking just grand total of spending, regardless of source, at this point. So that's the only way I can understand how much you're spending in 16, 17, 18, 19 is forget the source, just talk about what the grand total of spending is. And then we'll compare it, then we'll also have a chart of where the revenue comes from in each of those years. Again, now there you'd have the source, state, federal, local, and that would help me understand. Because again, like last year, we put in 2 million, but that was a lot of catch-up and building reserves, so that shouldn't really be ongoing operating expense. Your expense stream is fairly steady, really. So that's one request I've got. And then another point is you're, and it's good, your budget for this year will be significantly lower than what you actually spend. So for next year, we need to talk about exactly what we should budget, because, budgeting all the vacant positions, whether you intend to fill them or not, is is ultra-conservative budgeting. So, but that's a conversation we can have with Brad and so on, figure out what's the right number, what do you build in some vacancy is what we call it, that you'll have and so on. But, so anyway, those are my general comments. Again, congratulations on a good 2019. Thanks for the efforts and so on. If I could just get a big picture understanding the dollars better, that would be enormously helpful to me.
Okay, thank you. And I will say, just to complicate matters more, is how, as our allocations come in, we do something that's called random moment sample.
Random what?
Random moment sample, and this is basically 425 hits a quarter. And these are.
Per side, so 850.
Right, so for our children's services side and then our public assistance. And that's really how most of our funding from the federal government is allocated. So we are beginning a more aggressive management and administration of random moment samples. And that, hopefully, moving forward, you'll see even different changes in our expenditures and where the revenue comes from, because that will eliminate a ceiling excess in some of our federal allocations, and it will maximize the others. That was a goal of mine this year. I think we took some baby steps, but we have a long way to go. We're actually receiving some help from a retired gentleman that has worked in our system for 30-plus years.
He's probably still confused.
He probably is, but his Excel's work is impressive, I will say that.
Good.
So we'll, I'm not going to try to explain it, because I don't think I could if I had to. But we're hoping, moving forward, that you're even going to see a difference of an ask revenue side from the general fund in the future, because we can maximize these other funds. But we can gather this information and send that over.
Yeah, because I think you've got the pieces there. It looks like most of the slides we went through, if you take out the expense line and just throw it on a chart, year by year by year, and add it all up, I think we'll have what I'm
Pat,
after.
is this what you just gave us? Yeah, this is what it's last year,
The only thing,
10.3 million, this year, request 9.6.
the only thing it doesn't have is a forecast for the end of the year.
Yeah, and the forecast is more relevant at this time of year than the budget. So,
Sorry, Brad. Although already the intergovernmental, which is the grants that we get from state and federal, is higher already year-to-date in 2019 than it was in 2018, which shows that you guys are getting more reimbursement.
but how much of that is local? The local isn't broken out here.
I think that, Brad, correct me if I'm wrong, but the interfund, isn't that local?
Local.
That's local monies from the county.
Okay.
And the intergovernmental would be state and federal.
But this kind of gets to my point about the expenses. In 2016, the actual spending was 8.8 million. 2017, it was 7.8 million. 2018, it was 7.6 million. And year-to-date, we're at 6.6, and if is that through October, Brad?
Yeah, literally through November 4th.
Oh, up, so 10 months. So you could add 20% of that, and you'd be real close. So you're going to be about close to 8 million.
Stay close to email.
So,
Yeah,
and then the appropriations were 10.2. So that's my point too, is you are actually going to spend around 8 million, but you have budgeted around 10.2. Great, we didn't have to spend that all. Next year, it's 9.6. So again, that's what I'm after. And then how much revenue are we getting from the various sources? So this is mostly what I was after.
Okay, and I will work with Brad when he has time, and kind of make sure we put it in the format that works. I will say, we kind of budget to our federal and state allocations, so that's why our budget's probably inflated over expenditures. Because our goal, of course, is to expend the funding that's being allocated to the county. We're still just working on that. I do not want to do that by just adding staff. So it's probably looking at additional programs and other things that we can offer to maximize those funds. But we do try to budget.
The other piece of that I'm after is, okay, how much are we spending globally on all the different programs? And then how much is outside revenue versus local revenue? So that again, local revenues be going like this, but over time, you can get a feel for, is it 10% of what we're spending? Is it 5%? Is it 20%?
It might be something to look at, like an effective ratio of expense versus federal and state dollars because the federal and state dollars are services to people, so it might be interesting to look at, like, for every dollar we spend to expense, how much services and, which is revenue, are we bringing in to do that? So it might be like what do you think, Brad, like an effective ratio or something like that?
I'm working on it right now. Already breaking down federal and state limits.
Let me further kind of complicate it, just because Jeff says it differently than I say it, but I think we're kind of saying the same thing. First of all, the word funding, revenue, I find amusing. To me, revenue are dollars you generate in sales or whatever. I'd call this funding, I wouldn't call it revenue. So I think that word, although I guess we can set aside, but to me, it's not revenue, it's funding. So, does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so when I see the word revenue, it drives me crazy. Because to me, revenue is dollars we're bringing in that are really truly revenue. What I think Commissioner Benton's saying, and I'm probably going to say it a little differently, is from year to year, we have the federal dollars, the state dollars, and the local dollars. There's a total. And I'd like to see how much, from year to year, is the county, local funding going up, down, state going up, down, and is the federal going up, down? And if you have it all together in one chart, all aggregated together, it's a whole lot easier to, then I think I have a little bit of idea what questions to ask. You know?
Okay.
Or maybe you'll know what questions we're going to ask, and you'll have those answers. It's kind of hard to follow when one area may be affected one way one year, you know what I'm saying, I don't need to be redundant, so, and you're smiling, so I think you understand. The county dollars you were asking for was $2 million last year. I think you said 675 to 750 this year.
Correct.
Why would we do 750 if 675 is sufficient?
I just put it in for an ask. I mean, again, it's just kind of padding that. I think the 675 would be adequate, especially since they will increase that next year to the 925.
So the number we should be talking about 675. Okay. So I'll go ahead and pin you down on that.
That's all right.
And I think I have the highest confidence in the staff. So I don't have a lot of questions. Sometimes it's just clarification. Every time, this time of year, I get frustrated when JFS comes in here and we go through this process, and I feel like I'm an idiot. So, and I'm on the record saying that. So anything you can do to make it simpler, easier to understand. And once you get that template, month to month or quarter to quarter, you could, the total dollars, the state, federal, local, it kind of gives us a good running total that probably makes more sense to us
Okay.
than having it broken down, my perspective at least. And then we're going to probably have questions from that.
Okay.
So my thoughts.
Would you like it monthly, quarterly? Is there a preference?
Quarterly would be plenty.
I think quarterly is sufficient, just so we have some idea what the trend is. 'Cause I realize month to month, you can have dollars that are going to overstate or understate just because they haven't kind of averaged out, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, when you're measuring productivity or efficiency or key ratios, quarterly is good enough, and monthly.
And I'd love to see the word funding instead of revenue.
Okay. We can do that.
Is there a time that's better for you guys when you true up with the state on stuff?
Every program is a little different.
Okay.
So, I mean, we can kind of
Yeah,
compile,
it's a
I
good
mean,
point.
even some of this, you notice some was through September, some through October, because depending on the system.
Well, and I think you can put a footnote at the bottom, because if something doesn't true up for that reason, it's all 5 percentage points because of this, and, or what we anticipated, so.
What you could just say is tax revenue. Maybe that would make you feel better.
That'd make them feel worse.
Maybe worse.
No,
Yeah.
calling it what it is never bothers me, but to me, funding is kind of a compromise term.
Oh, that's funny. Mike, any,
One other question, do you anticipate this year looking at, I thought the chart was interesting. Why are the percentages in the counties different that are all in Collaborate? Wouldn't it work to have them all be more the same?
Every county does things just a little differently. Every county has different staffing levels, knowledge levels. I can't speak for the other counties and why they are where they are. I am probably going to look forward to other options, I guess, is the best way to say that, that I think would help our performance and possibly look at joining a different, we call it shared services at the state level. And even throughout the state, I think we have 8 regions now of shared services. Collaborate does Medicaid, SNAP, TANF, they do it all, and that really complicates things and affects kind of the performance side. Some of them are only doing Medicaid, and then all the SNAP and TANF stays in-house, and I prefer that. Again, we're not relying on other counties to do our casework. It should save us time of reading case notes from other counties, and it, you know, all those things come into play when it comes to serving the residents of Delaware County and the accuracy and the performance. So, you know, I think this is something the state put out there. I think it grew a little faster with Collaborate because they tried to get out ahead of it. But, you know, my responsibility is residents in Delaware, so if I can find a better way to do that, I'll probably come back and propose and see.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna ask if you were gonna look at it this year. And I, also with, you know, compliments to, you know, it seems like your workforce is more engaged and a little happier this year, and you can see the results and the, you know, reduced overtime and the metrics, so it's good to see.
And with the income maintenance staff then, do you have enough people now? You said you're all up to date.
I think we are. We do have that one vacancy. Actually, I anticipate someone kind of moving a lateral within the agency if the interviews and all those kind of things go well, kind of backfilling that position, but fully steady.
Okay,
If we make some changes down the road, we may have to do some other adjustments with staffing. Honestly, I think we could probably look at reducing staff. I don't want to do that through anything other than attrition, of course. But if we change our business practices, look at other shared services, I think we can manage our workload better with fewer staff.
okay. And I'd like to thank all of you for your expert work. I mean, this is really, so much of what you do is pretty doggone tough. You're dealing with people in crisis so often and helping them. And so, I mean, you perform a great public service and you're doing a great job. I wanted to thank you too for your work in stepping up and then also getting involved in the reentry packet for those leaving prison and jail. And we all had a tour of Helpline, and Susan Hanson from Helpline, I know, is working with you and Cassie and Diane, so thank you. Pooling those resources is just great, so.
I'm going to tag on to your comment
Sure.
there. Bob and I made a comment this morning, taking what you just talked about further. One of the areas that is kind of my pet peeve is these foster kids that turn 18 and how they transition. Because you think about when we were 18, we knew we had a home we could go back to, we knew we had a roof over our heads. And so the question I ask is there anything we as a county could do that we're not doing that would help those kids as they transition? And I don't have a clue what the answer is, but it's very much the same thing as stepping up or some of the other areas. How do you help people transition?
Right.
And I have a certain empathy for those kids because I really think it's got to be tough on some of them.
Sure.
And so I just thought I would make you
Yeah,
aware of that.
that's a good point.
And does Stephanie or Steve have anything they want to say? So they've been so quiet.
Okay.
So, and I know Bob probably can answer this, but we do have a program called Bridges where kids that are transitioning out of our care, we're hooking them up with a case manager that will start working with them before they turn 18 to start helping them either college or career planning, depending on what they want to do.
Great.
Kind of working with them to bring them along, kind of exactly
Yeah,
what
well,
you're
Bob and I talked about that. I mean, we talked about that program. The question was whether that program is sufficient as they look for housing, transportation. You may not have had a car and all of a sudden you're 18. Now you got to get around on your own if you don't have a parent to rely on. I didn't really have I just wondered if there's a way that program is it working well, or is there ways that we can work to improve it?
Right, and actually I went back, and I do have an email that I can send back with some of the different programming and things. Unfortunately, we don't have great measures of how the programs are working. You know, and the big thing is when a child turns 18, they have to be willing to work with us and not just walk away. And that's probably where we should focus first, is keeping them until they're ready to go. And honestly, you know, just when they turn 18, some of them just want to walk away, some of them go back to their biological parents, and some just don't want anything to do with the Job and Family Service Agency any longer. That doesn't mean we can't at least get them into other services, even if it's not through us. So I think those are just things that we should probably put on our radar and look more and see if there's other services out there, if there's other programming, or just providers in the area that we can at least refer to and have them go there if they don't want to work with our caseworkers any longer.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, and we'll take a brief recess until shortly after 2:30. Welcome, Auditor Keitsa and Deputy Auditor Cy Keeley. We're really happy to see you today, and I bet you're just thrilled to be here. But
So happy to be here.
yeah, no, thank you. Thanks so much for coming in. We will resume our budget hearing then, and we will hear from our county auditor.
Thank you, Commissioner Lewis. I've put on each of your places there a kind of a summary and an overview of the county auditor's budget. But as part of that process, what I wanted to do was to start off with a brief discussion about the revenues. I know there was a great deal of discussion about that at Friday's meeting, so I just wanted to add some background information that hopefully will be useful. First of all, I want to state that we agree with both Mike and Brad about the revenue estimates being very conservative. There is an explanation for that, although we have always tended to be conservative, and that goes back to something I was sharing with Commissioner Benton, that back when I first took office, because of the recession that had started, we literally had to trim about $3 million off of the county's general fund, and that immediately meant that there had to be a reduction in appropriations. So it can happen, and so for that reason, we've always tried to maintain a conservative but realistic posture. The other thing that comes into play is that the Budget Commission has the responsibility for issuing the official certificate, which needs to be done by the 1st of September. So that means that there are some numbers that aren't available to us at the time that we prepare the official certificate. And that actually is what happened both with respect to the property tax estimate as well as the sales tax. That really it wasn't until the last couple of months that we've really seen a significant increase in sales tax revenues.
And Auditor Keitsa, you call that then, you need to issue a certificate?
Yes, it's called an official certificate of estimated resources.
Okay.
And that includes, we obtain revenue estimates from the various departments that then are brought before the Budget Commission, and the Budget Commission approves that certificate. Now, the other thing that we are, as past practice, what we have always done is in terms of upgrading the revenue estimates, we've always done that with the first amended certificate, which we issue immediately after the first of the year. And we do that in conjunction with the carryover encumbrances, because we don't know until the end of the year what encumbrances will carry forward into the next year and which will not. So, and then that, of course, comes into play in terms of arriving at the unencumbered balance. Mm-hmm. So it's then the actual resources that are available to the county are the revenues, the estimated revenues, plus the unencumbered balance. So I know there was some discussion about the property tax for 2020, and the observation was made that it was the same as last year and less than what we'd actually collected. At the time that the certificate was prepared, the settlement had not been completed, so we didn't know exactly what the second half tax collection, property tax collection was going to be. It turned out to be higher than that figure of, I'm trying to remember, I think 1,506,000, if my memory is correct. 12,506,000. So had we had that number, we would have used the figure of the 12,898,000. Typically, and Brad was absolutely correct, that the increase in 2018 was the result of the sexennial reappraisal, because that's inside millage. It's not subject to any reduction, so as values go up, the revenues to the county go up correspondingly. In addition, we also had about 329 million, I'm sorry, 522 million in new construction that generated 329,400,000 as part of that revenue. So the adjusted figure for property tax in 2020 will be closer to, well, it'll be about 13.2 million when we issue the revised or the first amended certificate. So that's kind of a clarification there, and again, we agree with both Brad and Mike about those numbers. The other concern, of course, was the sales tax estimate. Again, we were at the end of August when that certificate was prepared. We're also in agreement that the sales tax is probably going to be over 65 million. If the last 2 months remain the same as the budget estimate, we will come in at 65.7 million. If the last 2 months continue to be as strong as the prior 2 months, then we'll be even higher. But I think that's very close to the figure that Brad had estimated in terms of sales tax. And so again, that'll be reflected in the amended certificate. The third area of concern was the interest earnings. Again, those figures come from the Treasurer's Office. And while in 2019, the revenues were 4.8 million as of the end of October, the real concern is what is happening with respect to the inverted yield curve and the 2 interest rate reductions that had come into play. And that's why that estimate was really kept at the 2.5 million. There was a concern in the Treasurer's Office.
And it's reasonable to assume it may well be down.
Right. So, yeah, so that's why we're, reluctant to use, because again, a lot of those longer-term earnings, may not materialize going forward because of the interest rate reductions. I also wanted to make another important point, and that relates to the cash balance. We have 4 policies that really relate to our credit rating with the agencies. The first and probably the most significant is the cash management policy, where we have committed to the rating agencies to maintain a 25% cash balance on a monthly basis, as 25% of the prior year revenues. For whatever reason, the rating agencies were interested in using that 25% against revenues from the prior year, so we incorporated that into our policy. We also have the other policies that you're familiar with, debt management policy, that we won't use debt for short-term purposes, post-issuance compliance, that we maintain all of the federal requirements as it relates to debt issuance, and then, of course, the investment policy adopted by the Treasurer's Office. So this kind of comes into play with, I know there was discussion about the road and bridge funding and the fact that it is coming out of the general fund. And as some history there, when the road and bridge, when the sales tax for road and bridge improvements was a voted levy, then we were allowed to deposit those funds directly into a road and bridge fund. When in 2008, for 2009, the commissioners changed it from being a voted levy to being one adopted by the commissioners, then the state auditor, Mary Taylor at the time, informed us that we could no longer transfer those funds into a separate road and bridge fund. They had to flow into the general fund. In a way, that actually turned out to be a good thing, because that policy has helped us, has helped to support the, our requirement with the rating agents to maintain that 25%. Because if we were in fact transferring those dollars out, like for this year, we would have transferred out 19.3 million. That would then not be part of the general fund balance, and would make it a lot more difficult in terms of being able to maintain that 25% threshold. So the advantage with that is that any unspent funds for the road and bridges remain in the general fund. And I think that all of you are aware there was also an agreement that 30% of the sales tax was committed to making road and bridge improvements. And that was an agreement with the townships. The other thing that I wanted to discuss a little bit, because I think there was also some discussion about the debt service payments in 2020, and the question as to why debt service was not going down, even though we had a significant saving with our recent refunding.
Actually, it was going up quite a bit.
Yes, and
That didn't make sense to me, but I see your explanation.
right,
We'll explain it.
and that was by design. Basically, well, first of all, Sawmill Parkway, we had excess bond proceeds, so those were used for debt service. And then the overall debt structure, we tried to structure it in such a way to essentially back-end load the debt service payments, so that essentially that the debt service would be level for years going forward. So that was kind of the explanation behind that structure. So I don't know if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer them as it relates to revenues. If not, I'll go on to our budget request.
Oh, very good explanation, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Good history. Any questions? Okay.
So, moving on to our budget request, most of our budget increases are the result of the 27 pays that'll come due in 2020. With respect to the county auditor's general fund request, where actually the budget overall request is down by 5.22%. That reflects a staff retirement, and the fact that instead of filling that position, we used internal promotions for 2 staff members and some additional duties that were absorbed by the chief deputy auditor. The increase in services and charges are for the One Solution upgrade. That's our accounting software that we use. That upgrade will cost about $30,000. And then we have CAFR expenses for the coming year of about $4,400. So, and that is funded out of the county's general fund. The county's auditor's weights and measures fund, weights and measures operation is also funded out of the general fund. There again, the overall increase was just slightly over 8%, 8.05%. The salary increase as a result of the 27th pay was about $5,500, and then we are anticipating the retirement of one of our members of the Weights and Measures group, and that payout will approximately $5,000. So that's the underlying reason for the increased request there. Materials and supplies also increased by about $800, and that's to purchase a replacement tablet that is used out in the field. We used to do the weights and measures inspections using paper forms. We've gone paperless, and we need a replacement tablet to do that work. The next part of the auditor's budget is the real estate administration fund, or this is a special revenue fund. In other words, its use is restricted strictly to the triennial and sexennial reappraisal of property. The overall increase in the budget there is 8.64%. The salary increase as a result of the 27th pay is about $50,900. The other significant expense is under services and charges, and that's for the acquisition of a mobile paperless appraisal module. What that will enable us to do is to go out in the field, and as we appraise properties, the appraisers can actually enter that into their tablet, and it'll automatically be uploaded into our appraisal software. So the way it's currently working, we capture the information on a tablet, but then it has to be re-entered into our appraisal system. And this would eliminate duplication of effort, as well as improve accuracy, because we're not re-entering the same numbers twice. So we're excited about that, about adding that module to our software. The real estate GIS office, that's also a special revenue fund. Again, that is part of the same fund as the real estate administration. And it is restricted to work related to GIS, or Geographic Information Systems activity. The overall increase there is about 8.27%. The salary increase for the 27th pay is $15,150. And then we are also looking at hiring a mid-level GIS analyst at a cost of about $58,320. As kind of the county grows, we're reaching a point where we need to have additional staffing in the GIS area, because of one staff member is currently split over GIS, 50% GIS, 50% real estate. And now as we have more work in real estate, that staff member will probably be pretty much dedicated to real estate, so we'll need to look at a replacement. The other significant item in the GIS budget falls under materials and supplies, and that's for the purchase of 2 digital cameras for taking street view pictures or images. It's basically what you see from the street. And we have not updated our images since 2009. So with these cameras, we'll be able to get street view images of the new subdivisions as they're coming on board. We are also looking at contracting with an entity for doing a county-wide street view update, since, like I said, it's been 10 years since we've had any overall county flight there.
On that topic,
Yes, sir.
Google does Google Maps, and it has Street View stuff. Is that, how does that differ?
It's kind of the same thing. Google doesn't do it everywhere, so there are gaps in the data, but it's exactly the same concept. And if I'm not mistaken, I think they also, I've got to double check, but I think sometimes they request those images from local entities. So, since we haven't updated our images since
Yeah.
2000.
It's time.
There'll be a bunch of places that look
From what I
different.
recall, I think there had been a request when we had done that.
Well, I'd written down the same thing. I wrote down Google Maps question mark, so I was just.
But it is exactly the same kind of model, that, you know, you're trying to get those images from the street. So, the next item is, of course, our data center fund.
George, before we
Yes, sir.
move on there, the item services and charges is significant dollars, but it really goes up and down a lot. And this year, we budgeted 690, we've spent 209 so far this year.
In GIS?
Yeah, in GIS, what would that be?
That is, this is where we fund our orthophotography and our oblique photography. And we're in a 3-year cycle with Wolpert Engineering that has the state contract for doing both the ortho flights, which are the vertical flights. So that's what you see when you go to the website. You just see the vertical flight, but we also have what's called an oblique flight, which gives us a view from the air of the entire property from all 4 sides. Again, very similar to what you get with Google, but this would be at an elevated level. And so that is where that cost is funded. We don't put the oblique imagery on our website primarily because of a security concern, because if that imagery is so precise that if you had a bad actor out there, they could really use that to, you know, do something illegal, let me put it that way.
Yeah.
So for that reason, we just have kept that internal for our appraisers to use, but we've not posted it on our public website. So, any other questions on that?
Nope.
But that's, yeah. And again, that's competitively bid by the state of Ohio, and we're able to buy into that contract as a result of this. The data center fund, that's also a special revenue fund, although that's a little bit of a misnomer because it's also funded by a transfer from the county's general fund. But the overall increase there is 7.56. The salary increase for the 27th pay represents about $36,500, and we are still looking for an application developer to assist Jerry Walraven. We have that budgeted at $87,500. We had a candidate last year. Unfortunately, that did not work out, so we let that person go during probation, and we are looking at, again, trying to refill that. In terms of materials and supplies, there's an estimate or a request there for $20,000 in terms of for purchasing new laptops to be used as loaners, as well as for training purposes. The next 2 items are really more 2019 budget items, but I wanted to just provide all of you with an update. One is the need for network storage upgrade and increase. We have $200,000 in our current 2019 budget for that purpose. Steve Lewis and his staff are reviewing 2 alternatives to see which is the best way to go, whether we continue with our existing vendor or whether we look at a new platform for storage. But obviously, as the county continues to grow, so does the demand for storage, you know, for all of the activity on the county's network. The other item is something that you're probably not aware of, so I wanted to update you on that. And that is, we received a directive from the Secretary of State advising us that the proposed plan that we had, they did not feel that that satisfied the requirements of Homeland Security. And what that, the distinction was, we currently have a firewall for any emails coming in from an external site. So that gets stopped and screened for any malicious content before it gets into our network. What Homeland Security wants is for Board of Elections systems that there is also an internal firewall, meaning that if I send an email to Carla Heron, that email will go through the same firewall and be screened for malicious content before it gets over to the Board of Elections. So that has resulted in the need for us to buy 4 additional, I think it's 4 additional servers, 2 here to support elections, and then 2 at our disaster recovery site, because we replicate everything that we do here at the disaster recovery site. And so that estimate for that portion is about a little over $50,000. In addition, the directive also instructed the Board of Elections to purchase Windows 10 PCs or desktop units. So the Board of Elections will be requesting a supplemental appropriation for that purpose as well. So the overall security upgrade based on that directive is going to be about $85,000. $50,000 will be covered by a grant that is already in place. It just needs to be appropriated. And then Carla and I will be coming to you to request the supplemental for the additional laptops.
But it's only Board of Elections there. It's only the Board of Elections that Homeland Security wants this additional internal firewall.
Yes.
What's amusing about that is we have states who will put driver's license in the hand of illegals, and the illegals vote in local elections, and they don't worry, and that's not a Homeland Security risk as far as getting accurate votes. That's an editorial comment. You don't even have to comment on that.
Well, and we actually thought that we had a pretty secure system when we met with them back in June, and evidently they've reviewed it, and I don't know, they may have contacted Homeland Security, but they came back and said that it was not, it did not meet their standards. So, and of course we have to, I mean, that's a
Yeah.
priority system.
Yes.
We don't really have any choice there. In fact, I've met with Steve and Shane, and we've reordered some of our priorities to make sure that that election system is, meets all the standards by the end of January. So that's kind of an overall priority for the data center. So,
When, George, I'm sorry, then you said it would go into effect when then?
it has to be up and running by January 31st.
Okay.
So we've already done the data board request for the equipment. That has been approved. We're only waiting on Anthony Sadie was going to get some updated figures for the PCs with the Windows 10.
Oh,
And as soon as we have that figure,
Sure.
then we'll be prepared to make the request for the supplemental
Okay.
appropriation.
Thank you.
The next item is a dog and kennel fund. That's also a special revenue fund. We do receive a portion of that, and that's to pay for partial salary of one staff member that does the dog licenses for overall for the county. That increase is about 3.18%, and it's basically reflecting the 27th pay, which is going to cost about $1,450. The last item is the unclaimed funds fund. We had some significant activity in 2019 in terms of funds that were transferred into that unclaimed funds fund. We received about $332,000 from the clerk of courts. We also received a transfer of about $167,869 from the treasurer's office. And then we also had a deposit of unredeemed warrants in the amount of $54,614. These, after 180 days, if a warrant is not redeemed, then it automatically gets paid into the unclaimed funds fund, and then it stays in that fund for 5 years. At the end of 5 years, then there is authority to transfer that back to the general fund. So we're anticipating transferring $23,000 into the general fund from the unclaimed funds fund. And then we also use $50,000 as a placeholder in terms of what we anticipate in terms of unclaimed funds coming in 2020, and we've used that as a standard for the.
So a lot of that over the 5-year period gets claimed if you're going from 23,000 to 332, so a lot of it ultimately gets claimed.
It probably will. We do have the responsibility that if it goes to the general fund and there is a claim, then that claim is paid out of the general fund.
The money from the clerk of courts and treasurers, how often do you get that? Do you get that every year?
No, this is, I think, the first. This was the first. Yeah, this was the
First
first
year.
time.
Okay, I was gonna say, I didn't think we had anything like
Yeah,
that
yeah,
on a regular
no,
basis.
no, typically, this is kind of a sleepy fund.
Yeah.
Like I said, about 50,000,
In
and
2025, there'll be a huge amount of, or at least depending on the refunds issued, but
well, could be, yeah.
Of
A lot
those
of
two
times, we do
funds.
we do get some funds when there's a foreclosure on a property and, you know, the warrant issued to the property owner doesn't get redeemed, so that's another source. But yes, you're absolutely right, that it was a big year. Normally, we're not there. And then we are in the process of updating our work plan from 2017. In 2017, we provided a number of workload measures for the various units within the auditor's office, and we're working on updating that as well. So we may be able to have that done before the end of the year. With that, that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Auditor Pikes. Excellent presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Questions?
I have none.
None?
Yeah,
Administrator Fromm.
yeah, I just have a question about the salaries on the data center fund. You know, a lot of IT services are always talked about amongst the departments. I noticed there's about a 40% increase from 2017 to 2020 if you take out the extra pay. Is that more adding, have we added that much staff over time?
No,
Or
we
is
have
it
not.
more market adjustments, or what is?
They were all market adjustments. The only new staff that we were looking at hiring is another applications developer. Basically, they're now application developer, but they used to be called programmers. I mean, but yes, Mike, that was all market adjustment for our desktop technicians, as well as we have 2 network administrators, and we need to stay competitive there. As all of you know, Amazon is coming into New Albany, and we don't know what that's going to do to the IT market. So, but yes, that's what that increase was.
Commissioner Benton?
You've done, and stayed in the data center fund, that group does great stuff and has taken on more clients, if you will. DD, Fairboard,
ED Orange Township.
Liberty Township.
Yep, Liberty, we're working on Liberty and Genoa. Those are two projects that we kind of had to hold off because of the elections process, and I've notified Genoa, and I'm going to be notifying Liberty that we have to do the election security first, and as soon as that is done, then we can get back on to bring them online.
And again, I think that's great. You know, you have the expertise and the scale that provides real relief to those organizations and so on. Is the revenue that they pay us reflected in this area?
It is, I believe, isn't it, Si?
I know it's quite a bit less than what they spend, or we're spending, and
Right.
therefore it's a win-win.
It's the fees and charges for services.
Right, yeah.
I guess I have a question about that one. If we're, yeah, I thought DD was going to pay us something in the neighborhood of a six-figure number, maybe a couple $100,000.
I think it's closer to 5. I want to say it's around 25,000. I can confirm that for you.
Yeah, I'd like to dive into that, because, again, I think it's a great strategic direction to go. But I thought they were spending like 400 and some thousand a year. And same with Liberty, Orange, Genoa, DD, Fair Board, I know.
Typically, when they have gone with us, they've ended up with significant savings.
Yes.
Because we
Get great service.
Yeah, we basically invoice them for the licenses that they need, and then there's an hourly charge depending on, if there's more than 15 minutes worth of a IT person's time, then they get charged for that, and there is a schedule for that purpose. But I don't know, Si, you were going to add something.
And it's billed quarterly.
I'd just like to see,
Sure,
yeah, what it is,
yeah.
what revenue we're getting out of them, because I have a pretty good idea for DD in particular, what they were spending,
Absolutely.
and I know there's,
It's a large reduction.
yeah, it was a significant reduction, which is great, and they get, again, like I said, much better service than they had because of the great people we have, so I'd like to see the details of
Sure,
that.
absolutely.
And along that line, and I talked to Steve Lewis about this when we started setting these up, shared service is a great thing. The thing we always, and I expressed this earlier to him 2-3 years ago, what are we doing to make sure that we're covering all of our expenses? What are we doing to make sure that we're raising the rates annually when our costs are going up? And if we have to add a person because of the extra work that's created, that should be shared by those organizations. It shouldn't be a county. So I guess just the reassurance that we are taking all those things into consideration. And it's still a substantial savings for these townships and other organizations.
Right, well, and we do, and again, I think we capture that by the billable hours when our staff is utilized. Now, the one vacant position, the developer position, that's really more of an internal position because that does programming for county needs. Typically, what we provide to the townships is access to our network, and then, of course, email and.
Well, there is some maintenance, and there is some, if there's issues, I mean, our people are the ones that are
Yes.
looking into it, so.
How many entities then will be, I know you mentioned Liberty, will be Genoa, who else?
Orange is already on there.
DD,
DD.
DD.
Fair Board.
Okay.
Disabilities. Also, the Finance Authority is on there. I believe that's, that's right, and the fair,
And,
county fair, Delaware
oh,
County
yeah,
Fair.
okay, okay.
So we're supporting that
Thank you.
as well. The big factor with bringing others online is getting the fiber optic connection to our network. And our position always has been that entity has to fund that portion of the piece to connect into our network, and then we can, and then we can provide
Okay.
that service. So.
Any other questions?
No, that's it. You answered a lot of my questions as we went along, so thank you.
Commissioner Benton.
Yeah, you always know your number.
That's right.
Thank you.
Okay, boy, thank you so much for coming and great presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner.
And we will recess then until 3:30. Okay, welcome, Sheriff, and Sheriff Russ Martin, and we are now back in session, or with our special hearing, actually. And if you'd like to introduce some of your esteemed department, that'd be great.
Sure. I've got, actually, I have my three chiefs here today that run each different divisions, Chief Dave Wiseman, Chief Jeff Balzer, and in the back, Chief John Scowden, and of course, I think you know Julie McKenzie, my executive assistant. And then Captain Scott Vance is here. He's been managing and overseeing the fleet for a long time in this office. And so they're all here to provide subject matter expertise as we go through the budget. If you have any questions, we've been working on it. They've presented stuff to me. So if you have questions that I can't answer, that's why they're here today.
They can. Oh, great. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. You ready for me to jump into this, or is that how you've been managing these?
Just, the floor is yours.
Okay. So first of all, on behalf of the Sheriff's Office, we appreciate the opportunity again to present our budget for 2020. Before I start, I do want to thank Brad Lutz of your office and Karen First. They've been, first of all, just great to work with, and they've been very helpful in providing their perspective as we've presented the budget to them. And as you know, it's been at least a year since we've had a formal finance manager director in the office, and we're hoping to solve that problem by the first quarter of 2020. We think we're real close to reconciling that position or vacancy since Pam Sonageri left and the office has been restructured a little bit. But in that absence, again, Brad and Karen have been incredibly helpful and appreciative. We are appreciative of the working relationship that we have with them, and I think it helps streamline things in advance. The other thing is I want to thank Julie McKenzie, who never likes to take any public recognition, but she and Chelsea Dean in our office have done just yeoman's work in the absence of a business manager in our office. And I'm really grateful for their work. And Chelsea's not here today. She's traveling out of state to test for her HR certification in labor relations management. So again, I share that just to say that she continues to be a great asset for the office in regards to HR matters. Thank you very much. So let me jump into the 2020 budget, and it's my intent to kind of break this down in three categories. I want to go over initially just a handful of the larger purchase items and capital items that may be of interest or have come to your attention in the budget. And then I'll move into, again, kind of revisiting and updating our strategic plan. If you recall last year when I presented to you, it was a 3-year strategic plan. And we've been moving forward with that throughout 2019. My intent is to kind of bring you up to speed on that. If you recall, we contracted with a consultant a couple years ago, restructured the office, and then took a look at our needs and concerns moving forward, given the growth of the community, growth of the county, and other issues that we're seeing. And wanted to present to you, kind of that 3-year plan, and we'll let you know where we are in regards to that. If you have any questions at all during, as the presentation unfolds, don't hesitate just to signal me. We'll stop right then and take questions. We don't have to wait till the end, okay?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So, obviously, by statute, the Sheriff's Office has 3 primary responsibilities. We have to staff and maintain the jail, the corrections facility, provides support to our court services in the issuance of papers from the court, and transfer of prisoners, and then general public safety. Let me share with you a little bit, and just for a refresher, it's Chief Balzer oversees this division in corrections, and if you have any particular questions that I can't answer, I may end up referring to Chief Balzer as well. So we are in the process of our budget this year to present to you a $100,000 upgrade for our camera system, the Stanley camera system. That The current system is a legacy system that's been in place for a long time. It's dated and starting to wear out. This will certainly be a significant upgrade to security, and will enhance us as we move forward to be Prison Rape Elimination Act compliant. And you'll see that a couple of initiatives that we have in this year's budget fall in line with the ongoing efforts to be compliant with national standards and also with accreditation across the office-wide. So that is a large purchase that we're wanting to move forward with in 2020. The reconfiguration of the inmate visitation area. Some of these are reoccurring requests that we've had in years past, and we'll, as we're funded, we'll continue to come forward with those things that we still feel are needs. Reconfiguration of the inmate visitation area. This is the where they meet with, the inmates will meet with family or with their clergy service or attorneys. And again, all this is designed for security enhancements and to improve those functions. We've asked in our capital budget this year for an architectural review of the current jail. This comes up annually. We are fortunate that we have not been at capacity for bed space. I talked to many of my peers around the state, and they're struggling with capacity in their jail as far as bed space. I would like to thank our Stepping Up initiative that's been headed up by Commissioner Lewis, and it's been a county-wide initiative. We're starting, frankly, to see a lot of those, some of those inmates that previously were entered into the jail either as mental health issues or maybe even substance abuse issues are being redirected to other services in the county. That's good for us. It's good for the county. It does reduce some liability in the jail and hopefully gets people the services they need to turn their lives around. Having said that, we're going to continue to have still some needs in that jail facility, structural needs and capital needs. Some of that will be ongoing improvements to the facility we have now and securing that. Last year's budget allowed for adding additional space and reconfiguring our booking area, and that's close to being done soon, and we're anxious to give you a tour of that when that's done. So I don't ever want to mislead you and tell you that despite the fact that we're not at bed capacity, we're still going to have some ongoing construction and building needs in our jail, and so that's what a lot of these capital expenditures are addressing. Additional closed-circuit TV monitors. This is over and above just trading out the old legacy system. This is additional monitors for the system, and again, all this is to help us to become PREA compliant and to meet additional jail standards for security. We need to upgrade our live scan fingerprint machine. That's another pretty significant capital expense. It's included in the budget. You know, the system we have now is, anybody know how old that system is currently?
I think it's at least 10 years old. It's coming to end of life with the current machine. We're just planning ahead because at some point it's going to fail, so we would have the money available to get it on them.
And that fingerprint system serves a couple of purposes for inmates, identifying inmates when they come in, plus for law enforcement services too, is to submit fingerprints of suspects and that to help identification. And then, you know, again, this all goes part and parcel with some of the current additions that we've done with our booking area right now. We want to upgrade our inmate property vacuum seal. When they bring their property in, it's logged, and then this particular device will kind of vacuum seal and secure everything. Reduces the opportunity for theft in the jail and just helps us better catalog every piece of property that comes in from an inmate.
Has that been a problem?
No, we have a vacuum sealer in now that's it's old, and so I wouldn't say it's a problem, but once in a while we've had stuff, particularly in transferring inmates to different facilities. And but I wouldn't categorize it as a systemic problem. We've had a couple of issues where people have claimed that they had brought property in that's turned up missing. And so again, we just think this will help in that. And then in our new booking area too, we want to improve those Stanley controls for that. Jeff, is there anything else you want to add to, Chief Balls, or anything else you want to add to any of those?
Yeah, the last one the sheriff mentioned, right now for the new booking area, which we're just waiting on the final inspection from the Department of Rehab and Corrections. We do have our body scanner now. We're training our folks on it this week, so once we get the full go-ahead, we'll have you up to take a look. Right now, that area has to be controlled by our central control, which is good as a backup, but the officers out there, I don't know how they get included in the original project. That's what we need so those officers can actually operate their doors instead of having to call for it every time over the radio. It's a good backup system.
As the chief has indicated, we'll look forward to having you folks have a tour of the new booking facility, which I think is really going to streamline inmates coming in, and the fact that we've this body scanner that we've purchased. I don't know if you recall, the legislature allowed us with some changes to the law. We were able to purchase that out of inmate funds that come in, so there was no impact on the general fund in regards to that body scanner. But a lot of law enforcement, a lot of jail facilities have continued to have problems with contraband making its way into the jail that's associated with the overall opiate problem. So we're hoping that that body scanner will be another step towards minimizing liability and just making the facility even more secure. So we thank you very much for last year's appropriation on that, and we look forward to sharing that when it's done. Any questions in regards to those capital expenses on the correction side? And if you have some at a later time, we can also bring those up. So now I want to move over to those large items for the law enforcement or the enforcement side. Each and every year, you know that this is a large expenditure. It's the vehicle replacement, and Captain Vance is here today if we need to address that. But really, I don't think the script changes on that from year to year. Those vehicles are acquiring a lot of road miles. We've hired additional deputies, which means more cars are on the street more often, and we just want to make sure that the fleet we put out there is operating efficiently and it's safe for our deputies. If you have any particular questions, Captain Vance can answer those, and if you need further breakdowns, I know we've provided it in the past, and I'm not sure if we did it this year, but all those vehicles, the miles that they have, the anticipated miles by the time we go to replace them, we think it usually justifies why those vehicles need to be replaced at that time. And we've been talking with Mr. Lutz, and staff is excited or certainly interested in the ongoing leasing with some of the unmarked vehicles and some of that too. So the Sheriff's Office is anxious to partner with the commissioners on anything that will reduce overall cost to our fleet management, and so we look forward to any recommendations that you make, and I think Brad's been continuing to communicate those to us as well.
So unmarked cars are not in this number, or they are?
No. Well, there are some, well, I stand corrected, Scott.
Candidly, it's the first time I've seen that number, but by looking at it, I would assume there are unmarks in that.
Okay. We don't have do we have a list of all the vehicles today? We can provide that to you. We have been working with Mr. Lutz on that going into today.
I'll just talk. I'm going to try to make sure. So Karen, that there are no unmarked cars in that.
No, it's the 15 SUVs with all the add-ons, extras, yeah.
Okay.
And I kind of feel like Freddie Mercury right now, you know, with where he just holds the mic stand. Anyway, anybody? No. Okay. So that number is just 15 marked cruisers. In the enterprise order that I'm finalizing, we have put in the unmarked cars as requested by the Sheriff's Office. We're getting final numbers on the enterprise order, which will be coming to you very shortly to have you go through that and decide what you want to do with those requests. So to the point of the sheriff, there are no service and charges currently allocated in his budget for the enterprise funds. At least I don't believe so. Julie, probably, you don't recall adding any services and charges to your budget related to potential enterprise order, correct? Okay, so that would be an additional amount potentially, but obviously a relatively small one.
How's this number in
Yeah.
total compared to prior years, this request?
I can tell you the number, after hearing what you just said, the number has increased as the 2019 ended the model year for the current Ford Explorer, and they have done a retooling of the body style. As such, the car, from what the dealers have told us, the state term pricing hasn't came out yet, but at a minimum, it was a $4,000 increase per car. And Ford's kind of cornered the market right this second, where it's either the Ford Explorer or a sedan that doesn't meet our needs whatsoever by size. And the only other one that's out there, but no equipment is available yet for it, was a Dodge Durango, and it still has a center console, which is less than ideal due to where our radios and all the other gear and floor console just doesn't make sense. So that number is probably slightly high, but it was based off unknowns that we had at the time because those bids haven't been released. A lot of the upfitting equipment that we purchased with the cars, cages, consoles, and even the light bar width is in question this year. That the manufacturers for those specific pieces are going to have to change their items as well.
How many cruisers do you have in the fleet today?
Total cars counting.
Not the unmarked ones, just the
Okay, so
deputy cruisers.
Frontline patrol
Yeah.
is broke down into 22 frontline cars, divided amongst there. Then there's the 6 lieutenant cars, 3 backup cars, and then 3 lieutenant cars. That's just patrol. That doesn't take into consideration the 9 SROs and the 10 vehicles that are related to court services that do over the road. And there's several other ones that I could keep in there, but that number runs up around 93 when we start adding all this together.
93?
Yeah. I think
Okay.
it's like 103 when you put in marked or unmarked and
Okay.
especially. That's off the top of my head.
Okay. Okay.
And I think Scott said, Captain Vance said 6 lieutenant, I think he said it's 6 sergeant and 3
6
lieutenant.
sergeant, 3 lieutenant.
6 sergeant and 3 lieutenant vehicles.
That's just within patrol.
And if you recall, we added 1 vehicle last year outside the general fund budget. The clerk of courts had a fund and purchased
Oh, that's
for
right.
transport a van to transport prisoners, correct? Was that last year? And an SUV, 2
Yeah.
vehicles. So we're continue to be grateful for her helping to supplement our fleet a little bit and provide some newer frontline transport vehicles for our court services division.
How
So-
many will you need then from the enterprise fleet, did you say?
If I recall correctly, we were talking about 5 total.
That'd be
five.
half your unmarked fleet then.
Well, the unmarked fleet is not for the detectives, but there was also a request to replace what we, it's an excursion in our trailer vehicle. It's a 99 that the rocker panels are completely gone on. So we were looking to do a leased vehicle pickup truck to maintain that and take 2 vehicles away. And then with the chiefs that we have now and the additional detective that we have one car that's going to be a backup for all of them as well as a backup for the detective fleet when they're down. So we had to add 1 vehicle for that.
Okay, thank you.
We can provide an itemized list of all that, and some of the detective division vehicles that have been purchased in recent years, they're not getting the miles put on them like the patrol division, so their life usage is a little bit longer, and I would suspect as time goes on that we would not be replacing those. If this enterprise system works out, we would not be replacing those with purchases, but we would be forcing those vehicles out of the fleet and then replacing them with a rental. I think that's the plan. So,
I'm going to guess the enterprise cars, for it to be fiscally responsible, they've got to be cars that can then be resold. So I don't know if that applies to these cars or not, because if not, it probably doesn't really work under the enterprise system, I'm guessing.
I can't use the power button on that thing. So, Eric's the only one that can use it. So, in short, yes, the enterprise program requires, not requires, is best utilized when we buy vehicles through the program that can be resold. So, for example, in the sheriff's office right now, I don't have the exact vehicles because frankly, there was some concern about availability of certain types, but regardless, the cars would be Sonata-sized with covert lights and covert lights, siren, and power seats, which will not hurt resale, because either those covert lights could be removed or it could be sold as a police vehicle, a covert police vehicle. The Tucson, two SUVs are Tucson-sized, and those would not be an issue on resale. The only vehicle that we would be looking at leasing that would be marked and have a light bar and so forth would be the pickup truck, 3/4 ton. But trucks, frankly, have good resale value regardless if they've got items that have been removed or so forth, and once again would have value as a police purchase. So these vehicles would have very good resale value regardless. The only ones that we would not even really consider as part of the enterprise program would be the cruisers, because to that point, they would not have the resale value that would make it worthwhile.
Okay.
okay. And if you require more detail on that, we can provide it to you at a later date. Okay, so those are, and then the last item is we continue, as the county moves from a predominantly rural county to a more suburban county, we get an incredible volume of requests for residential speed enforcement. And so we have a need to add additional residential speed enforcement equipment and equipment to help us reliably gather data on speeds in our residential areas. And so those are purchases for oftentimes what is considered stealth radar equipment that can be mounted and can get good data to help us utilize the resources when the need is there, find out when the highest volume of speeders is, and traffic control as well.
How many extra ones will that give you? I mean, how much are they each? So how many will it?
That gives 2 of the monitoring devices.
So $5,000 each?
And there's also another one in there. We also do a residential speed initiative. We go out and show the residents what actual speed looks like and how it works. So they're around 4,000 apiece, and then the LiDARs are around 2,000 for the total.
Any other questions? So I wanted to highlight what I thought would perhaps garner the attention of the board in regards to some larger purchases. And now I want to move into the organization of the office. We all know that generally 85 to 90% of your budget is personnel, and certainly the sheriff's office is no different than that. At this time, this is a overview of the office, but Julie has for you, each of you, a packet that will give you a look of our 3-year hiring strategic plan, and then a breakdown of each division, a more detailed breakdown of each division. And I'd kind of like to just walk through those to give you an update on how the monies that you have provided for us in the budget are being spent. So the slide you have before you up here is really just the literal 20,000-foot perspective. And I think the first sheet that you have should be an Excel spreadsheet that shows positions in 19, 20, and 21. These really almost mirror what we provided for you last year in the 19 budget. As with any strategic plan, as time goes on, you can identify, you might identify eliminating positions if the need goes away, or reclassifying some positions. And we have done that between 19 and 20, and we'll continue to do that. But by and large, what you have in front of you there is very close to what we provided for you last year in our budget plan. If you, and I will talk in a moment about, well, let me talk about it right now. Let me talk about 2019 to bring you up to speed. In 2019, we talk about, and I shared with you last year that we knew that this was going to be a pretty good size ask over the course of the next 3 years. And you were very gracious in funding a large portion of what our requests were, and I want you to know how we've managed that. In the last year, 2019 alone, we have conducted over 300 interviews for vacancies in that 2019 list. Of those 300 interviews, 89 moved into background investigations. Our office conducted 89 background investigations, and those are thorough vetting processes that are pretty labor-intensive for our detective division. From those 89 backgrounds, 43 positions were hired in the Delaware County Sheriff's Office. 43 positions were hired in Delaware County Sheriff's Office. Of the 43, or of the, when you talk about overall, we did have 25 candidates, 25 employees either move on, resign, or didn't work out. So puts us on the plus side in the overall scheme of the budget of 18 new positions in the office in 2019. And we're continuing to move forward. One of the things I want to share with you, it's, the question often comes up about unfilled vacancies in the budget. And it's certainly a legitimate question. We've addressed this in the past. We are hostage a little bit to the hiring process. It takes generally about 9 months from advertising to testing to background to hiring somebody, particularly on the patrol or LE side, perhaps a little less on the correction side, perhaps a little less on the civilian positions. We are also held captive, unfortunately, to only 2 local academies in Central Ohio, which are full-time residential, well, not full-time, they're full-time academies. One is the Ohio State Patrol Academy on 17th Avenue across from the fairgrounds, and then the other one is the Columbus Police Department Academy. So we have some unfilled vacancies in the 2019 budget, but we have identified and offered positions months ago to candidates that unfortunately have to go through their law enforcement training, and the academy doesn't begin. The next OSP Academy is when? February. February of 2020 is the next OSP Academy, and the Columbus Police Department Academy starts in December. So that's one reason why we'll have those unfilled vacancies. We have a part-time academy here, but it's just unrealistic to send somebody to a part-time academy because you've got to fill half their day with employment in our office. It's just very problematic. So that is, and we're not the only law enforcement, all law enforcement agencies in Central Ohio are bound to that same problem. We continue to target men and women who are already certified, but the philosophy of the Delaware County Sheriff's Office is first and foremost to find the very best people, hire for character, and train for competency. And, but we have, as of recently, begun to try to even market hire for certified law enforcement agents, law enforcement officers. The reality of that is you end up stealing from Peter to pay Paul, just like what's happened to us. We've had deputies who have moved from our office to the Dublin Police Department, have gone on to other law enforcement agencies, the Powell Police Department, simply because they pay more. And now, you know, we'll probably end up hiring deputies who have worked someplace else that pay less. I mean, it's just part of the shallow pool of candidates that we're looking at. And I will tell you that in the last 3 years, it's become a nationwide problem, and that it's becoming more problematic for law enforcement to hire, to recruit and hire. Fewer and fewer people are taking a long-term interest in being in law enforcement. And I think a lot of that is attributed, some of it can be attributed to the economy, which is good, but unfortunately the negative and the negative portrayal of law enforcement nationwide, by and large, most of it not accurate, has kept a lot of young people from pursuing this as a career. So that is a problem that's being shared nationwide. And so anyway, that kind of gives you an overview of hires, how long it takes to hire, some of the reason we have these unfilled vacancies. And in our 2020 budget, we've tried to work very diligently with Brad and Karen to identify realistically when we think those hires would be added throughout the year. And so we've tried to budget those positions for a smaller portion of the year. Does that make sense? And frankly, the budget that you have in front of you is really, it's not a fully actualized budget for our 2020 needs. If we are fortunate enough to be able to fill all of these positions in 2020, it's very possible I could be coming back to you later in the year asking for a supplemental to keep us on course with our 3-year strategic plan. That's just a reality. So you can take a look at what our goal is for 2020. Like I said, we have 6 right now scheduled for the academy, 6 total.
Six in CPD and actually 1 for OSP.
So we have 7 right now who they're not hired yet, but they will begin when those academies open up. And then we'll move into the hires for 2020. And then you can take a look at some of these positions we've pushed out to try to, after conversations with Mr. Lutz, to try to stay within budget constraints, push those out for 2021. And I've provided for you then the next 3 sheets of paper in the handout are actual breakdowns of each one of these divisions. And without going into detail, I'm willing to answer any questions you might have, but the organizational chart breakdown that you have is of all 3 divisions. The header obviously across talks about they are. In the red would show the current vacancies, and then the blue would show the proposed hires in the 2020 budget. So the Excel spreadsheet gives you the overview, and the organizational charts break that down. And I didn't know at what level of detail you wanted to address those things today, or if you had any questions, we could certainly answer them. One of the things that we have found, just again for overview, is that we knew this was going to happen. When we went to body-worn cameras, the request for public records request would be significant. Do you know those numbers off the top of your head, Dave? Okay, but I think they measure in the thousands, I thought.
Really?
Yeah, so we've actually hired additional staff to keep up with those requests. They're very labor-intensive requests because some of the images in the video has to be redacted with children, and so our records people have to go through each and every piece of that video and try to redact that. So while the body-worn cameras, we think, have been a good purchase, it wasn't a cheap purchase. We found, as we expected, that most claims against the office, we've been exonerated. That body-worn camera confirms the good police work that's being done out there day in and day out. But as soon as the public became aware that that body-worn camera video was available, the requests for it were just off the charts. And so there's the demand there. County continues to grow. I know the commissioners receive periodic calls from our populated townships for more law enforcement coverage. And as I've always done in presenting a budget, this budget is provided to provide public safety, but not necessarily community policing. We've had some early talks with Orange Township and some of the other townships about contracted police services, which would be at least a shared funding and would provide another level of law enforcement services. But, frankly, none of that's come to fruition yet at this point. And we've shared with our townships that if that's something they want to do, it should be incorporated in the budget and should be presented in a budget cycle. And we've also been very frank with them and telling them it would probably take a year to begin from beginning to start to fill contracted positions. The other thing is, it's not included in this budget, is our schools, Olentangy in particular, continue to grow, and the interest for additional school resource officers, that has been intimated. There's no additional school resource officers in this budget, but I could foresee in the next year, if the levy passes, new levy passes in the Olentangy School District, that they might come back to this office wanting additional school resource officers to staff their buildings for security and response. So that's kind of an overview of the demands that we're seeing. You know as well as I do the continued growth in the county and the demand for services. I think the sheriff's office does a good job. We've done a good job keeping up with that. I was presented over at Galena, the village of Galena last week. They're looking at growth and expansion over there and had some concerns and questions about public safety response. So I think the budget that the sheriff's office has provided for you keeps us on plan for our 3-year strategic plan. We know it's an ambitious plan, but given our time with the consultant and with staff, we think it's reasonable, and we think it will address the ongoing growth in the county and demand for service. Any questions on the organizational chart, vacancies, positions, or anything that you require?
Under the corrections jail director, Director Flynn left, and so I know one of the co-directors is Jessica Jackson.
Jesse Jackson, yep.
And then also, who is the other co-director?
Nick Carafa.
Oh, okay.
We have 2 assistant directors over there, and actually, today is Monday. Shelley Fan retired as a law enforcement officer 2 months ago. She's been rehired as a civilian director in the jail.
Ah, great,
So,
well, wow, okay,
We no longer have a vacancy in the director's
Okay.
position.
great, great.
That provides, that was a win-win. We felt that was a win-win for us. Lieutenant Fan, formerly on the law enforcement side, had been working in that capacity for the last couple of years, and we knew she was approaching retirement, and frankly, she's provided great stability and leadership, and we worked that out for her to be a civilian now in that capacity.
that's
She'll
great.
provide continued continuity, and frankly, she is developing the succession plan. I think this office in years to come will have a internal staff that is prepared to replace her position when she moves on.
Great, good, great news. Any other questions?
Yeah, I had a question about the township's requests for additional support, and you really addressed that. Any others, any of the villages or others that might be interested in additional support?
Well, I've had one phone call with Mayor Hopper and Galena, and I think they're just at the beginning of their growth over there. We've just had a brief conversation about the ability to contract if the residents of the village were concerned about response. Once again, as I share throughout the township, throughout the townships, our response time has gone up a little bit in the last year, about 45 seconds, I think, over the year before for emergency calls for service. We had a remarkable year in 2019 to be honest with you, with injuries and pregnancies. We've hired a number of young deputies. We've worked hard to diversify our workforce, and we've hired more women in the position of deputy than in recent years. Some great candidates, great employees, but sometimes young women start young families. And so we have worked a lot of minimum standards, not of simply because we've had people out on maternity leaves, and then we've had a couple of bad runs with injuries to deputies. And while I think every law enforcement executive would love to have all this margin built into their budgets and manpower, that when somebody tweaked a knee or somebody was out with a pregnancy, you had positions to backfill, but our budget is just not designed for that. There's very little margin, and when 2 or 4 or 6 people go out, it has an impact on our day-to-day operation, which has probably slowed down some of our emergency response time. But we have great working relationships with all of our law enforcement partners. We have mutual aid agreements countywide, and regardless of what portion of the county there's an emergency problem, dispatch is communicating with that area and the supervisor, we'll get somebody else there. So it would be an anomaly of not having another law enforcement agency to respond to an emergency if all the deputies were tied up in a particular region.
That's a good point, right.
The budget, I'm not sure if we've gone through everything, but the budget doesn't include anything for the Career Center and Bixby campus relocation and expansion. You've got no
No, that
thing in
is,
there.
I mean.
I don't think that won't happen next year. I just was curious. I didn't think it had anything in it.
The budget presented to you, neither capital or personnel, has nothing to do with that, but that's a great segue into, this is the last slide. We have been working on a weekly basis with Meacham and Able, and we've been really excited about their response to our understanding of the programming in our facility. And this is just the only slide in the presentation. I don't know what you folks have seen, but while we didn't think this was part of the general fund budget, we think this is probably the last piece to really capturing the fact that we think we're one of the finest sheriff's offices in the state of Ohio. And a central facility located for all of our services is long overdue, to be really honest with you. It's decades overdue, and I think that previous sheriffs and commissioners, if they could have worked together, might have had a new sheriff's office built a long time ago. So I'm going to continue to advocate on behalf of this. I know the men and women of my office are extremely excited about this possibility. I think it will improve efficiencies, it will improve oversight and management, and frankly, if the commissioners, and I hope you continue to move forward on that, if we build this facility, I think it will meet our needs for the next 2 to 3 decades, and just really improve morale, to be honest with you. We have no locker rooms right now, no workout facilities. Parts of the operation are parceled out in different buildings throughout the county. We are really excited about this possibility, and I just want to continue to appeal to you to give this serious consideration on behalf of the Sheriff's Office.
Brad, did you have a comment?
I just, excuse me, wanted to confirm what the sheriff had said in regards to not only his budget, but the overall budget presented to you. We did plan on some, in the capital fund, some costs related to design and so forth, but nowhere in the 2020 budget is it really any of the significant capital costs related to the Bixby campus, whether it's the sheriff's office or the current building, included, because obviously we're still very much in the design phase. But in all fairness, we are getting closer to what we consider the end of that design phase, and we will, of course, have many more slides and renderings to present to you, I would say, relatively shortly.
Yeah, and,
Okay, thank you.
The facility as designed is one that I think fits the overall nature of the facility. It's not it utilizes a lot of natural light, but the materials being used are very appropriate and economical for, new construction. Also there's been several facilities that were not put in here and utilizing the Career Center to the fullest. I think when you see that the Career Center site has been used, and so the new facilities here focus more on the office. For example, the property and evidence storage.
Correct.
And some of the workout and others. We've pretty much got the Career Center button, fully utilize that building shell to reduce the cost down on this facility.
Yeah, the plan we've been working on does there's still some existing footprint in the Career Center building, where the sheriff's office will be sharing facilities over there. But frankly, and I think you all know this, the need for a secure property area is probably over a decade old. And our facility was broken into about 4 months ago. We've been very fortunate to this point that things could have been much worse. And so we still have needs inside that career facility, the career building, the footprint there. We think that'll really improve on security and property management. This will consolidate all of the working functions of the office, the building you're looking at here. Our patrol division and detective division are housed in 2 separate buildings right now. To put those 2 work groups together would really enhance efficiencies and professionalism. And, but we're still going to have all the law enforcement services that are currently housed, I'll call it out at the jail on 42, all that will migrate to this facility. Adequate parking, secure parking, just again, I can't stress it enough. It's just really long overdue, and I'm hopeful that as the commissioners work through this, you'll share in my idea and vision for it as well. So.
Any other questions?
Yeah, you've been very patient over the years, all of you have, with the offices that you have today.
I'll close with this. The desire over the last 8 years is to build a culture of professionalism at the Delaware County Sheriff's Office. And we're not done building that culture, but I think we can be recognized as one of the finest sheriff's offices in the state of Ohio. In the next term, I'd like to move from just building a culture to building a facility. And it didn't escape me as I sat in my office and watched the new courthouse being built that, you know, frankly, I knew politically and I knew financially it wasn't wise to come forward at that time with a need. The need's been there for a long time. And, you know, it's a strong appeal on my part that I really hope this board will partner with me in helping bring this to fruition as a legacy and create an iconic sheriff's office for probably the next 3 decades.
I have a couple of comments. First of all, as you know, I've been a big supporter of getting the evidence issue addressed because it worries me if we have a fire or something and destroy all that, so I think that's fantastic. Just a couple of observations and comments. Pretty aggressive on the request for staffing, and I think that's got to be looked at. I think it's, you know, the county has limitations, and I'll just leave it at that for the moment. First, I heard about a health facility in the new facility here. I'm not opposed to it, but I would think if that's a road we're going to travel, I would hope the union contracts would reflect an understanding that physical fitness is part of, one without the other does not seem to be, doesn't complete the process. So I think you know what I'm saying. You're smiling. So.
Yeah, the reason I'm smiling is because in the last contract cycle, we became one of the first law enforcement agencies in Ohio, one of the first law enforcement agencies in Ohio to include in its collective bargaining agreement law enforcement fitness standards.
So we're on the same page then?
We're on the same page.
So one without the other is just a wasted exercise.
Absolutely. And we frankly have, as a part of our collective bargaining agreement now, the union agreement, that was huge.
And I heard a comment about adding personnel. I can't imagine a situation where we'd have to add extra people for the new facility. I heard a comment about efficiencies. If anything, I think we would have created efficiencies and hopefully could eliminate a person or 2 or 3. Just a challenge and observation.
Yeah, no, I think that's realistic. We have, you know, support staff throughout the facilities now. I mean, I don't want to step before you today and make a promise. You build me this building, I'll lay off people. I know, so I want to capture that. But I do think if we're fortunate enough to move into a facility like this, I think over the course of time, we'll be able to capture those efficiencies. And it's very possible that through attrition and through streamlining, we'll see a smaller footprint in the overall staffing. I mean, that would be, I think that's just good stewardship. So I would be on the same page with you there.
And one other, this constant request from the township regarding more, it's a request that isn't going to go away, and I do think we have some obligation to try to find I'm going to say win-win, and I would encourage those conversations to continue, especially with Orange and Concord. I know they both have made requests. I know Concord has expressed a concern about areas being vacated when there's something going on in some other part. I'm not sure they're accurate or inaccurate, that's not my point, but they certainly deserve reassurances that they are being heard and communicated. So I think that's a responsibility of ours as well as
Sure.
commissioners.
And I have those conversations with them routinely and encourage, if they reach out to you, they're always welcome to come to me directly, and I've met with them, probably the same people that you have as well. And it's been really the same message since I've been here for 8 years, is that the commissioners, and the budget that I've presented, it is ambitious. I would use the term ambitious over aggressive, but it's an ambitious one. I understand that. And I don't want to shoot myself in the foot, no pun intended, but we've talked as a staff. The budget that we've presented to you is not fully funded for our 2020 goals, our desires. We know that it's possible I could come back at a later time for a supplemental, or a 3-year strategic plan could turn into a 4-year strategic plan. And, but I think by and large, what I've requested to you today is, it's not a wish list, it's what we've identified, and frankly, if it's fully realized at some point, I think some of the concerns, and if we have a healthy year, some of the concerns that are out there, we could probably better meet those with the levels of staffing. But again, as Commissioner Lewis knows, if you want that next level of community policing, Delaware, Genoa Township, Powell, those residents are generally paying an extra layer on top of that to get that. The infrastructure's there. We're willing to do that if those townships eventually want to come to the table and discuss that further.
I live in Orange Township, and I know that's part of the campaign this fall. It's one of the big topics that some of the candidates are talking about, is what's an appropriate level of additional support. So,
And I tell them all the time, I'm willing to come out and address any of those grassroots organizations to talk about cost and the level of service that we can provide, but I just think those townships have to make a determination if that's what their constituents want, to come to the table and have a discussion on it.
right. And they've all said they've been talking to you, and they know you're willing to sit down and work on it, so.
Yeah, I think the startup cost for a law enforcement, their own police
gosh.
departments is pretty exorbitant, while the sheriff's office already has that infrastructure in place, and we can sit down and negotiate with them what we think are reasonable measures to take it to the next level with some type of shared funding. That's been the discussion for the 8 years that I've been here.
Right. I think they're probably getting close to getting serious and moving forward on finalizing something. So we'll see. A lot of it will depend on the election.
We look forward to that, don't we? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sheriff, and I'd like to thank you, too, for your leadership with stepping up and for having Cassie Neff, program director, your program director, really do the day-to-day coordination and leadership of that program, and she's done a fantastic job. And on so many fronts, with reentry again, and she's just been great, always great to work with.
Yeah, I would echo that. And I think we're starting to see some of the benefits of that as fewer mentally ill are entering our jail. They're more quickly
Great.
being assessed for mental health treatment. So, I think we're starting to see some substantive responses to that program.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for all your
Yeah,
efforts.
thanks to all of you for all you do.
Yes.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you. Thank you.
We'll be available for any questions at any time through the process.
All right. Our special session has ended. We adjourn.
No,
We don't.
adjourn.
We didn't adjourn. Okay, we recess.
until Wednesday.
Okay.